Welcome to the Out Agenda, coming to you on archive.kpfk.org. And welcome to the Radio QGLLU podcast, a show that takes a deep dive into what the queer, gay, and lesbian Latina community is talking about. I'm Rita Gonzalez.
I'm Lidia Otero.
I'm Mario J. Novoa.
In today's episode, we're talking about Unidad, Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos, a documentary film that debuts on PBS starting June 1st, 2023. Unidad is a powerful and inspiring film that tells the story of the Los Angeles organization Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos, GLLU, founded in 1981. GLLU is one of the first major queer Latino organizations in the country. The film follows the group's history in activism from its early days fighting for AIDS awareness and the LGBTQ rights to its more recent work on issues such as immigration and police brutality.
The film features interviews with GLLU members, activists, and community leaders and archival footage of the group's work. Through these interviews and footage, we get a glimpse into the challenges and triumphs of the LGBTQ Latin community. We see how GLLU has fought for the rights of its members and how it has helped to build a more inclusive and just society.
Unidad is a must-see film for anyone who cares about LGBTQ rights, social justice, and the power of community. It's a story of resilience, of hope, and the power of love. Today we have filmmakers, director Gregorio Davila and executive producer Roland Palencia.
Roland Palencia is the founder and president of Palencia Productions and the former community benefits director and corporate trainer at LA Care Health Plan, the former executive director at Clinica Monseñor Oscar A. Romero. He is also the executive producer of TransVisible, Bamby Salcedo's story, and Unidad Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos, chronicling the community activism of LGBTQ Latines in the early 1980s. His greatest pride and passion is being a mentor to future generations of community leaders. Also, Gregorio Davila, under his production company, LA Queer History, Inc., has written, produced, edited, and directed 2 short films and 1 feature length. Nancy from Eastside Clover, which played in 12 festivals around the world and won 5 awards, including the Audience Award and the Seattle Queer Film Festival, and Jean Cordova, Bitches, Lies, and Feminism, which made its festival debut at Outfest Los Angeles in July 2017, winning the Jury Award for Best Short Documentary and several other awards globally. His newly completed feature-length documentary, LA Queer History, a film showcasing the rich LGBTQ+ history of the Los Angeles area, has already won 3 awards. The film is distributed by the History Channel A&E networks in Germany and in the US on your local PBS station. Okay, this question is for Roland. GLLU played a pivotal period in your life. How do you believe that being part of GLLU has helped you and your community?
You know, I think just the fact that I was young, my early 20s, and also that the movement itself was young. You know, GLLU was founded like almost a decade, right after the Stonewall Rebellion. So the world was wide open to us. It was, certainly, we hadn't had the gains that we have now. But on the other hand, it just seemed that everything was possible. And I think that started to shape me in terms of my own personality. I was going to UCLA at that time, and I just remembered that I felt a certain level of optimism because for many of us, especially at that time, being closeted and having had very religious upbringing, it really kind of shape who we were, and then to find this completely alternative narrative about liberation, about being just another possible person with a different future. I think that's and GLLU made it very palpable because all of a sudden I had a community, I had support, and I think that that was just so revolutionary for myself individually, but also as a community.
And my question is for Gregorio. Gregorio, why did you feel it was important to direct this documentary, and why did you choose the subject matter?
Well, mostly because I'm a queer Latino, and when I was growing up and coming out, I didn't have anything like this that I had any mentors or anything to look up to. When I first came out, it was in the 90s and everything was very white. I was living in Seattle at the time, and all of the media, all of the movies, all of local advertisements that were gay in the local magazines, it was all muscle white men, and that's what all I saw, and that's what I thought that being gay was supposed to be and supposed to look like. So it took me a long time to realize that there was a queer Latino community. I could merge my cultures, my two cultures, my queer culture and my Latino culture. And so I wanted to explore that. And I heard of GLLU when I was making LA a Queer History, when I interviewed Roland Palencia, and he mentioned it. And I went online to research it. And this was in 2015. And there was virtually nothing online about GLLU. So I knew nothing. So I wanted to explore it in this film process. And now, hopefully, when somebody goes, a young queer Latino hears about GLLU and they want to explore it and get some more information and insight on what it means to be a queer Latino or what it can mean to be a queer Latino, that maybe they go online and they can find something and make some connections with other people.
This is Rita. Roland, this question is for you. To revisit this integral period of your life, why do you want to support the making of this documentary when you have new endeavors in your career and personal life?
Gregorio alluded to this, and this is just the lack of information about our struggles, about our history. And I deeply believe that the people without a history are people without a future, only because there's so much that we can learn from what happened in the past and use those lessons to really create a new, a different future. We are under attack. All our, queer communities, Latino communities, clearly under attack. And I think that there's a lot in history, curse that people had when, being queer was crime, and how they began to kick those closet doors and really gave us like a blueprint, for us to liberate ourselves. And I think that there's so much in our past history, including GLLU, Gay Lesbian Latinos Unidos, that we can use as a blueprint, take a page from that history that we created, which, by the way, we had no idea we were making history, and we were. And use that, use all those lessons, and more than anything else, just the valentia, right? Just the courage that we had to speak who we were and to create a different future for our community. And we've been here before, and we can do it again. We will overcome.
And to go a little bit further, this is Mario again. Roland, do you remember meeting the hosts of this show, Rita and Lydia and Eduardo? Can you talk about that?
You mean meeting when I was in GLLU? Yeah,
The first time you met
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. I mean, one of the what was, I don't know if you want to say revolutionary, but what was really great about GLLU was that we absolutely wanted to have a co-gender organization. And the men in GLLU were very, very committed to that. And I am just grateful that Latina lesbian communities and, Rita and Lydia in this case, really wanted to also be part of GLLU, and that they felt very welcome. I honestly believe that our Latina lesbian sisters saved GLLU, because I think that we as men, especially at that time, we tended to, I think, pretty much, not to say that we're not community oriented, but I think it was our own personal, sexual kind of liberation. And that absolutely is a great thing. And that is something that, we always need to have forefront and center. But I think that when the women came into the organization, it really gave us a much better sense of how systems work, not just empowerment, but how power begins to impact our communities. And And it's also gave us like a broader view of what was happening in other communities, including Latin America. And this whole issue of where does this oppression really come from? Patriarchy, and certainly homophobia, xenophobia, transphobia. I mean, you name it. And I think that political, becoming personal kind of approach, I'm not so sure that we would have had it. And even if we would have had it, it would not be into the intensity and to the scope that I think our sisters brought to the group. And I think that that's what we wanted to show. There was something inside of us that really clamor for that kind of involvement and that kind of perspective. And of course, I remember Eduardo. I mean, we were all young, we were vibrant, and we just wanted to have an impact, and we did.
Well, Lydia remembers the exact date she met you. I just thought I'd add that. Okay, so this question is for either one, Gregorio or Roland. Can you tell us who you interviewed for the film and what stood out to you about the people you interviewed? Well, to both of you, can you tell us who you interviewed for the film and what stood out to you about the people you interviewed? Why were these people selected that you interviewed for the film?
Well, that would be a Roland question because he selected them.
Yeah, so I didn't interview anyone for the film, but I did call, the people that I felt had been involved in GLLU and in a very critical roles. And I, made a point to also make sure that there was gender parity and who had stories to tell. It doesn't mean that they are the only representatives of GLLU by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt that their stories were universal enough that it will resonate with so many other GLLU members and certainly with the public at large.
This is Mario again, and this question is for Gregorio. Why do you think the GLLU story has not been shared in the context of the larger LGBTQ plus movement?
Well, I think as we all know, there has been a marginalization of people of color stories in the queer community, but not only that, I think that it was relatively local, Los Angeles based, and I think that in the LGBT history, we generally hear of New York and San Francisco, and the story of the Los Angeles contribution to the LGBT movement is, I think, just in recent years coming out into the light. And books like Gay by Lillian Faderman and Stuart Timmons, and then also our film LA Queer History, have been helping to put Los Angeles on the map in terms of LGBT history and the contributions that we have offered pre-Stonewall. A lot of people think that nothing was happening before Stonewall, but there was. And I think that GLLU made a huge impact on the community, definitely in Los Angeles, and the LGBT community and the queer Latino community, even though it wasn't on the same level as something like ACT UP, but they did a lot locally and made a huge impact on people and a huge impact on people that read about them and have subsequently heard about them. So, yeah, I think that probably just because there are glamorous stories, people have considered certain stories in the LGBT history to be very glamorous, like ACT UP and like Stonewall. And they often are very white centric, but there are histories and people and stories that have contributed to our community as a whole that are just now coming to light. And I'm looking forward to hearing more that can come out as well.
Also, if I can add to that, first of all, I am so grateful to Gregorio and to Mario, for, wanting to do this. And, when Gregorio approached me about this film, and this is obviously purely anecdotal, and he says, has the GLLU story ever been told on film? And even now I get emotional about it because I don't know if it crossed my mind. I don't know if it crossed anybody else's mind, but I think that's part of the internalized oppression that many of us are subject to. And again, this is my own interpretation of this. But, after he asked me that, after Gregorio asked me that, I said, like, why haven't we? Why haven't even ourselves taken the initiative? Aside from Gregorio said, which is so very true, that there is this ecology of ignoring people of color stories, and especially queer, people of color stories. There's also this internalized oppression that I felt when he asked me that question. And I think by doing this film, we are correcting that. And we're telling people, and I think that's one of the important things about this film as well, aside from many other reasons, that your story is worth telling. And you might not believe that what you're doing is important, but you are making history. When two of you get together and you create something outside of yourselves, you are creating history. You are contributing to the well-being of our community. And for me, that was a huge lesson. So I just deeply wanted to thank Gregorio and Mario for taking this on. And, as young people, to also, carry this message to other younger people. Your story is worth telling.
Okay, this question is for either one of you or both of you. There's been enormous strides when it comes to the LGBTQ plus rights in this country since GLLU was created. What do you think some of the biggest threats are that pose a risk to eroding these gains?
Well, every time there's progress from marginalized communities, there's always a backlash. There's always a backlash. I mean, we've seen this in the African American community, we've seen it in the Asian community, we've seen it in the Jewish community, we've seen in Latino community, and immigrant. I mean, you name it. There's always a backlash, and I think that we need to be ready for that. And how do we counter that? I think that there's also, we have, because we've been so repressed and oppressed, we have really focusing a lot on personal empowerment, which is really critical. And I think to some extent, not totally, but to some extent, we have not taken care of power. And empowerment and power are two different things. And one of the things that our opposition enemies, however you want to call them, they understand power. And for them, empowerment is kind of a byproduct of power. And I think that we're coming from a different standpoint. We're really focusing on empowering individuals and maybe communities. And I think that we need to start understanding power a lot better, because public opinion is on our side, but public policy is not in many states in this nation. And so how do we begin to reconcile, this public opinion in our favor, but, having this like huge backlash that is designed to repress us, every member in our community. And I think that is by truly understanding power a lot more, and definitely infuse it with personal empowerment. But we had to run for offices, we had to get elected to commissions, we had to run campaigns, we had to just do whatever we need to do to really once again or newly again be in positions of power, making those decisions that impact our community.
Gregorio, did you have anything to add?
Roland summed it up pretty good, but I think that one of the biggest threats to gay people and LGBT people, I should say, is the same one that has always been a threat, and that is unfortunately religion, and people who use their religion to make policy and to impose their religious beliefs through policy. And not to say that all religion is bad and that all religious people are like that, but we still have that right-wing religious power structure that still wants to control everybody, and it's because they're threatened by anybody who is not, they're threatened that their power is going to be taken away if people who are not like them gain more power. And I was just reading recently that I can't remember the exact specifics, that somebody was, there were people on the right that were trying to make it a requirement to vote. You cannot vote unless you serve 3 years in the military. And then I read that they were trying to obviously ban trans people from joining the military. So obviously the link there is that they're trying to ban trans people from voting. I mean, that's kind of the obvious tactic that they're trying to pull. So it's things like that. And then also, I think we have a very weak democratic leadership right now. It doesn't fight hard enough. And I think it's unfortunate. And That needs to change. We need to put people in our leadership and the Democratic leadership that are actually going to fight hard for something instead of just keep on throwing their hands up and saying, "Oh well, the Republicans are blocking us." Because the Republicans never do that. They seem to always get what they want. It's always the Democrats that have to settle. And so I think that power dynamic needs to shift, and we need to show LGBT people are a voting bloc, and we need to start voting and holding the leadership accountable and saying we're not going to vote for you unless you make some changes and make it happen. It's your job to figure that out, how to do that.
This is Lydia. I have a question that maybe both of you can chime in, and it has to do with our own internal community, with our internal raza, and how they, and largely being members or followers of the Catholic Church, also have a problem with queers. And if you see that these attitudes, if you see that these attitudes perhaps have softened over the years, or if this bias or hostility sometimes toward queers has gotten better from the Latine community, I guess what would it take to achieve greater acceptance of LGBTQ people within the Latine community?
Well, I grew up in a family like many other Latino and Latina people who had a very machismo attitude, and I never would have thought of coming out to my family back then, especially my uncles and all that. I mean, I was terrified of all that. But what I saw during the Prop 8 era and that fight for marriage equality that happened as a result of Prop 8, I saw a large shift in the Latino community shortly after that, because this is what I saw. I saw that Latino people who, two of their main focus, what's important to Latino people is family and religion generally, and work. And I saw Latino people, Latino families, traditional older people realizing that they can have marriage, and they can build a family, and they can have children. And I think that actually helped Latino people to realize and accept that, they can still be a part of our family, and they can still continue to have children, and I can have grandchildren, and so on and so on. And that's what I saw. And I think there was a huge shift in the Latino community because of that. And I can only imagine that it is going to keep getting better.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's a question of personal policy. And, by personal is, just coming out, just telling our stories. And I think that human beings relate to other human beings by stories, and just being authentic I being like a patriarch in my family, in this sense, patriarch in a good sense, in the sense that being a caretaker, and I being my nephews and nieces feel that I inspired them to go to college, because I was the first one in my family who did that. And it's always been about family. And I think that exemplifying that without compromising our own queerness is something that people really relate to. So I think that's at the personal level. But the policy level is changing the laws, making sure that all these very retrograde laws do not pass, and that we oppose them, and that we organize. Because when something, even though there was somewhat movement on, let's say, marriage equality, when it became the law of the land via the Constitution, or via the Supreme Court in this case, it shifted a lot of people, because they said, well, now it's the law. And that tends to also change people. So I think it's the personal and the policy, and combining those two things. And actually, I believe that in the Latino community, among Catholics, we have high acceptance of queer people, and certainly on marriage equality. But one more thing that I will say is, when that whole fight with Proposition 8 was going on, there was a break. There was a break where the right wing was not attacking immigrants. And somehow our enemies, they kind of like dump us all together, right? They're not just suppressing one minority. I mean, sometimes they take turns, but generally they just want to go for the whole shebang, so to speak. And but there was a little bit of a break. But then after Prop 8, for whatever reason, the right wing all of a sudden began to drum out this hate against immigrants. And I think that a lot of people in the Latin community started to relate to our struggle because they were being also targeted by the same enemy. The key thing is to realize that we had to join forces at a movement level because our enemy is basically the same. They will not stop. They might begin with one group, but they will not stop until all of us that they consider marginal are oppressed. And I think that us having that understanding, and I think the Latino community began to have that understanding, and I think that began to shift their opinion in terms of how these laws against us, impacted us. And especially, because as Gregorio said, we Latino communities really cherish family, and they saw that they were hurting their own members.
This is Mario again. Roland, what do you hope will be achieved through Unidad and this deepened understanding of the LGBTQIA leadership in GLU, as well as the national LGBTQ movement?
I really hope that it motivates a lot more people to tell their stories, queer Latina people to tell their stories in whichever format and whichever forum that they use. And also that people have a deep understanding that knowing our history is really critical, for us to create a new future. And that doesn't mean that we're going to replicate exactly what we did, but to learn from it. And so we can start at a different level and have a foundation that we can spring forward and make even more changes than we have already. So I will just say, motivate people to tell their stories, and also that we learn from our history so we can take our movement to another level.
Gregorio, as a queer Latino filmmaker, it seems that you're on a quest to highlight the queer movement in the US, more specifically and regionally in the LA area. Do you feel that as a filmmaker, you've received the support of the film community? And what are your hopes about your future and younger filmmakers looking to share these stories or their stories?
Well, do I feel like I've received, did you say acceptance by film community?
The support.
Support. Well, I can't really speak for, when you say film community, I can't really speak for like the Hollywood community because I don't operate in that system. But there are a lot of queer Latino local filmmakers here in LA, and Mario and I know a lot of them, and we have networked and worked with a lot of them and been in festivals and things like that and done projects with them. And it is a very close supportive system I have found, and I've been enjoying watching the things that they're doing and supporting them in any way I can. So I'm enjoying seeing that happen. And I've seen a lot of them, some of them have their films are on HBO Max right now, and they've been given awards. And there's one trans Latina filmmaker that has a major feature film coming out this year in theaters. So it's wonderful to see all that. And I'm hoping that we can all keep that close-knit support system going. And what was the second question?
The second part of that question was about younger filmmakers and future filmmakers and looking to share their stories. You have any advice that you'd give them?
Well, my advice would be just to do it. You can't wait for anybody to give you money. You can't, even though you want to work towards that, but you can't wait. You get a camera, get some microphones, get people around you that are willing to help you, do the work, and just do it, because you can't wait for people to magically come over and give you the support that you need, because it's not always going to happen. But once people, I think, see that you're working and you're doing something and you're passionate about something, I think people will respond to that. So my advice would be is just to, if you need, do your research and do the work and just do it. And because that's the only way it's going to get done. And in the beginning, when I was doing films, and Mario knows this too, is that we did them for virtually nothing, and we got paid nothing. And now, as we're progressing and we're getting more jobs and we're doing more things, the pay is starting to come in. With this film in particular, with Unidad, I remember in the early talks with Mario and Roland, and I was like, oh, I can make this film for like, $10,000. And Roland's like, what? He's like, no way. And I believe I probably could have made a very good version of this film for $10,000. But Roland came in, coming from the world that he comes from, said, no, I can make you guys more money. We can get more money. And you guys, most importantly, also need to get paid yourselves, which I really, really appreciated. And now I'm realizing that, yeah, we do deserve to get paid. I just want to thank Roland for that as well, because, we were so used to coming from a world where we felt, maybe to go back to Roland's earlier point, where we felt that we didn't deserve these things because we come from a Latino community that doesn't normally get these opportunities. And so we sort of felt that this is just the way it's always going to be. So it's been nice to get to this point. And I would say to go back to the point, the question would be, just do the work. And if you're passionate about it and you're talented, and you're going to have to, take some lumps in the beginning, but people will see your work eventually and you will get to the point that you want to be. But it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of rejection, because we got a lot of rejection. I know I have.
This is Mario again. In full disclosure, my name has come up several times during this discussion. I am the producer of Unidad Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos, and also co-host of Radio QGLLU. So I just wanted to let the audience know. But I do have a final question for Roland and Gregorio. And we can start with Roland. Roland, what do you hope audiences will take from hearing the stories of the people featured in the film?
When we started GLLU, we really didn't have any role models, queer Latine, men, women, or even trans role models. And I, not to say that we are necessarily role models, but that, we were people back in the early 80s who decided that our community needed to have something better than what it had up to that point. And what I hope they take is that there's so much more to do, because freedom, liberation is not automatic and is definitely not permanent. So it is up to this generation to continue that trajectory of making our communities progress, because as we know, it can be rolled back in a wink, and we're seeing that throughout the United States. And so just for them not to take for granted that it's automatic, let alone permanent, and that there were people who fought so they could live to their highest human potential and don't have to worry about these, very unnecessary, corrosive, and draining conversations about questioning who they are.
And again, Gregorio, what do you hope audiences will take from hearing the stories of the people featured in the film?
Well, I just hope that people, Laura said in the film, I think a couple times she said that one of her main goals in GLLU was to show not only the white LGBT community, but the white community at large, that Latinos there were queer Latinos as well. Because like she said, in my experience growing up, she said, oh, that's all people saw was white people in the media and everything. And so I'm hoping to further that discussion and progress and show that Latino people have been part of queer culture and that have contributed to the liberation and exposure of queer people in so many different ways. And then I also hope on the other side of that token to show Latino people that there are queer people in your community as well, because I feel like there is sort of an otherness that goes on in the Latino community regarding queer people still. And I just would love to see more of a convergence between the two communities, more of an intersectionality within those two communities. And so that, and to inspire young people, young queer people who experience the same thing, that are still experiencing the same thing that I did, figuring out what it means to be a queer person, and then figuring out what it means to be a queer Latino person. Because for me, those were two different things. And hopefully this film will help that transition become easier to a lot of younger people.
This is Mario. We want to thank Roland and Gregorio for joining us today. Our guests were executive producer of the documentary Unidad Gay Lesbian Latinos Unidos, Roland Palencia, and director Gregorio Davila. Unidad Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos can be seen on the broadcast channel PBS SoCal and KCT during the June Pride Month and on the PBS streaming app, available 24/7.
This podcast is a segment of the Out Agenda. I'm Rita Gonzalez.
I'm Lydia Otero.
I'm Mario Novoa.
It was produced and edited and recorded by Rita Gonzalez. Radio QGLLU is a product of KPFK. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you. This is, it's great. It's fantastic. Keep telling our stories.
Thank you.